The Giving List Women was created as a vehicle to help the world understand that women and girls are by far the most powerful lever for change. Change needed to make the world a better place and a more just place for everyone. We work hard to give donors at every level the fact-based justification to apply the lens of women and girls to their giving. Because if you want to have impact, you must treat women and girls as a lens, not as a lane, in every area of philanthropy and investing in general. That's not a theory, that's a fact, and a fact that is particularly important as we go through the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world. If you want to solve climate change, educate a girl. If you want to end a war, put a woman at the negotiating table. If you want a higher return on your venture fund, follow the ladies. At just 2% of global philanthropic and venture funding, we are severely undercapitalizing the greatest problem solvers on this planet. Imagine what happens to humanity when we finally fully fund them, or even just equally fund them. Our experience over the next 2 days will be organized around a 3-part journey. The fracture, part 1, where we analyze the current global crisis. The reframe, part 2, where we find new perspectives and hope. And the phoenix, where we commit to rebuilding together. Our program is built on the principle of intersectionality, that every issue we touch, from global sustainability to war, to violence against women, to human trafficking, to leadership, they're all inextricably linked. We cannot talk about any of them in a vacuum. Just like global wellness is inextricably linked to local wellness. And that intersectionality will be reflected in our panel makeup. What you'll also find is that no matter what the issue, women and girls are disproportionately impacted, and women and girls are the most effective drivers of solutions. In thinking about what I wanted to say today, I considered the larger context in which this convening is happening. A time I call the Great Disenlightenment. And in so doing, I recalled what John McCain once said, who was oddly quoting Chairman Mao, when he said, "It's always darkest before it's pitch black." And that would be funny, except that right now it's not. The great disengagement we are experiencing is global, marked by a rapid rise of authoritarianism and a fierce rollback of women's rights across continents. This crisis is existential. We have seen the shuttering of the Office of Global Women's Issues at the US State Department, and it is projected that 50% of all women's rights organizations will close in 2026 due to the rescinding of funding. Meanwhile, tech oligarchs are rushing to market AI-enhanced robots, which is great if you need a date. And by the way, how did we come to believe all women as long as we are politically aligned? Not sure how that happened. I'm a student of history, and I recently wondered, other than the Civil War, were we ever before this divided? In fact, there was a time in our country when our country was as divided as it is now. There was an ongoing unpopular war. We had a corrupt crony president, but the year was 1971. It's instructive and important to look at some of the heroes from that time who pushed us towards the light. One badass in particular, one of my particular heroes, was Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman elected to Congress. I happen to have her campaign button on right now. Who notably considered compromise as the highest of all the arts. Imagine that. Remember, she also said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Famously, on June 8, 1972, Shirley Chisholm shocked her supporters by visiting her greatest political nemesis, George Wallace, the proudly racist governor of Alabama, in his hospital room where he lay with 5 bullets in him from a failed assassination attempt. Chisholm was politically progressive while Wallace was, well, Wallace campaigned in front of the Confederate flag. And at the time, Wallace and Chisholm were fierce rivals for the Democratic presidential nomination, if you think the Democratic Party is a wide tent today. According to Governor Wallace's daughter, when the black congresswoman from Bed-Stuy showed up, the Alabama governor was incredulous and said, "Shirley Chisholm, what are you doing here?" He knew he was Shirley's nemesis and that her supporters would at the very least be annoyed by her visit. Maybe he even thought she was there to finish the job. But her answer literally brought him to tears. "I don't want what happened to you to happen to anyone," she said. The two talked and prayed together. Wallace's daughter, who then described Chisholm's visit as life-altering, and said that when Chisholm left, Wallace did not want to let go of her hand. She said Shirley Chisholm had the courage to believe that even George Wallace could change. Indeed, after that visit, George Wallace became an ally to Chisholm. In 1974, he persuaded a group of Southern congressmen to support her bill extending the minimum wage to domestic workers. Later, he publicly disavowed racism and sought forgiveness from blacks. In 1979, Wallace arrived in his wheelchair at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. He confessed to all the harm and misery he had caused, and then, as he left the sanctuary, the congregation rose and sang Amazing Grace. Shirley Chisholm's answer to racism was not more racism, it was humanism. She understood that villainizing the other was not just combustible rhetoric, it paved the way for a culture of assassination. This was post-JFK, post-RFK, post-MLK, and she herself received daily death threats with 3 notable attempts. Our mission is to find the light as Shirley did, and to begin the work of the Reframe. She understood that villainizing the other was not just combustible rhetoric, to illuminate the path ahead. I think that was a really important line. I think I'm going to read it again. Our mission, to illuminate the path ahead as women are uniquely suited and prepared to do. This convening is about creating space and light and finding the support and partnerships needed so that we can do things previously not thought possible. I'd like to share with you an image that is framed in our home. It's an iconic Mad magazine cover depicting Alfred E. Newman holding the branch of a tree with one hand while he blissfully swings from a swing that hangs off the very branch he himself is holding, which is, of course, a physical impossibility. But if there were a caption, which there's not, I imagine it would be, "He doesn't know it can't be done, and therefore it can." Over the next 2 days, we are going to ask each of you to do what every filmmaker asks its audience to do, and that is to suspend disbelief. To not allow ourselves to be limited by the historic record of that which can't be done. This is the spirit of the Phoenix, rising together to build a new system that works for all of us. This convening is about finding new ways of reframing our challenges so that we might find opportunities for change that we never before thought possible, so that we can find ways to move from reaction to action. At the Giving List Women, we hold a few defining values. We value independent thinking. Like Shirley Chisholm, we believe we do not need to agree on everything to work together. We value kindness and generosity and reciprocity. We value inclusion because to create a more gender-balanced world, we believe that men, indeed every gender identification, must be part of this conversation. We cannot ask half the world to buy into narratives they were not a part of helping to build. And we value good leadership. We believe leadership is not an office or a fancy title, but rather how we choose to show up in the world every day. Perhaps I feel particularly strongly about this one because, as Sarah mentioned, I am the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. I do not believe that because someone is in a position of authority that they should be blindly followed or respected. The most heroic leadership in history has come from outside the official ranks of power. Over the next couple of days, we will ask each of you to think about what values do you bring to your work, to your philanthropy, to your life. Because if we're serious about creating change, we must unite around our shared values. Our aim is to be a container where this theory for change can live. An investment theory that says if we do this, if we come together and form an unbreakable team, united in our efforts to build a nuanced narrative for humanity that allows for a more gender-balanced world, everything changes. Humanity desperately needs a narrative. We can write that narrative, or someone else will write that narrative. But know this, if we are not pursuing our own dream, then we are destined to be part of someone else's. We do, however, have one central dilemma. All around us, networks are crumbling. Networks at the center of which are governments and business models and funding systems that have failed. Which is no surprise because over the course of history, that's what governments and business models and funding systems invariably do. They fail. What invariably doesn't fail are strong human relationships. And that's what must be at the center of our networks if we are to meet this moment. Human relationships based on shared values and respect and trust and reciprocity and compassion. Think of us as a family, one that has suffered life-changing, traumatic events. Will our marriage make it? It can, but only if we are connected and strong and determined, if at the core of our marriage is trust and respect and love. And at the very least, isn't this one of those times it makes good sense to stay together for the kids? Together, we are building a movement that transforms how philanthropy can show up. So thank you so very much.